First story, The Whispers of Krampus. It was a chilly December night in a small town called Maplewood in Vermont, where I had decided to spend the holidays with my uncle and his family. The town was quiet and peaceful, but there was a legend that had been passed down through generations. A legend that frightened the children of the town for centuries. My cousin, Abby, had always been fascinated by the story of Krampus, the Christmas demon who punished naughty children. I didn't believe in such things, but Abby was adamant that she'd seen the creature in the woods, just outside of town. On the night before Christmas Eve, Abby begged me to go with her to the forest, claiming she had heard the whispers of Krampus calling her name. I wasn't sure what to think, but I couldn't resist her plea and decided to join her. We walked through the snowy woods, the trees looming over us like silent specters. The wind howled and the branches creaked, as if they were whispering warnings. Suddenly, we heard a sound behind us, like heavy footsteps crunching in the snow. I turned around quickly, but there was nothing. Abby stopped dead in her tracks, her eyes wide with fear. "It's him," she whispered. Before I could ask who she meant, I felt a cold gust of wind sweep past me, followed by a low growl. A shadow moved in the trees, its eyes glowing a sickly yellow. It was Krampus. It grabbed Abby's hand and ran, the snow beneath our feet scraping with each step. We could hear Krampus's hooves clacking on the ground behind us, growing closer with each moment. I pushed Abby forward, urging her to run faster, but I could feel my strength fading. Just when I thought we'd be caught, we burst out of the forest and back into the safety of the town. I looked around frantically for anyone who could help, but the streets were empty. We dashed towards the house, slamming the door behind us. But as we looked out the window, I saw Krampus standing in the middle of the street, his eyes burning into mine. Abby whispered in my ear, "He only comes for the children who believe." That night, I could hear the whispers of Krampus in my dreams, his growls echoing through the forest. And from then on, I could never look at Christmas the same way again. Second story, The Frozen Footsteps of Krampus. It was Christmas Eve in the small town of Glenwood Falls. I was sitting on the old porch with my younger brother Ben, watching the snow fall softly over the fields. The town had that classic holiday feeling you could only find in places like this. But there was an unease in the air, something almost wrong about this Christmas. Ben was a curious child, always asking questions about the world around him. That evening, he turned to me and asked, "Do you think Krampus is real?" I laughed it off at first, thinking it was just a silly question from a young child. That's just a story they tell kids to keep them behaving," I said, ruffling his hair. But Ben was serious. "Mom told me that he comes for bad children on Christmas Eve." His voice was low, almost whispering. I reassured him that there was nothing to worry about, but as the night grew darker and the wind began to howl, they couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us. At midnight, we heard a sound outside, a crunching noise in the snow. Ben clutched my arm, his eyes wide with fear. I was about to tell him it was just the wind when the sound grew louder. Then I saw it. A figure emerged from the darkness, tall and hulking, like its face hidden beneath a hood. Its cloven feet crunched in the snow as it approached our porch. "Ben, stay inside." I shouted, but he was frozen in place, staring at the creature. The figure stopped just outside our door, and I saw its red eyes glowing in the darkness. The Krampus stood there for what felt like an eternity, then slowly turned and disappeared into the night. I grabbed Ben and rushed inside, locking the door behind us. We sat in silence for hours, listening to the wind howl and wondering if Krampus was still out there. The next morning, we found his footprints leading away from our house, but the snow was undisturbed where the figure had been. Ben didn't speak much after that, but I could see the fear in his eyes. And every year since, on Christmas Eve, the footprints appear again in the snow outside our house. I don't tell Ben about them anymore. I just lock the doors and pray that Krampus doesn't return. Third story, The Silent Steps of Krampus. It was a week before Christmas when I drove into the small village of Oakfield, a quiet place nestled in the heart of Michigan. My parents had brought me here to visit my uncle for the holiday season. They had always spoken highly of the place, but I had never been before. That night, after dinner, my younger cousin, Emily, told me about a legend she had heard from the local children. They say Krampus comes for the naughty kids around Christmas, she said, her eyes wide with fear. He leaves his mark on your door before he takes you away. I laughed it off at the time, telling her it was just a story to keep kids in line. But as the night grew darker, a cold wind began to howl outside the house, rattling the windows and sending a chill down my spine. Around midnight, I heard a noise outside the window. A slow scratching sound like claws dragging across the wooden door. Walked over to the window and looked out into the snow-covered yard. The moon was hidden behind clouds, and the only sound was the wind. But then I saw it. A shadow moving quickly between the trees. At first, I thought it was just the wind, but the shape seemed too large, too unnatural. Heard Emily's voice whispering in my mind. Krampus. Suddenly, a loud bang came from the door. I ran down the stairs, heart pounding, and opened it to find nothing. But there on the snow was a large set of footprints, each one deep and sharp, as if something heavy and clawed had walked away. The next morning, Emily was gone. Her parents searched the village, but found no trace of her. Only her scarf was found, tangled in the branches of a tree near the edge of the forest. I never returned to Oakfield, and to this day, I can still hear those scratching steps in the night.